will shape and mold this country, or it will not be molded and shaped at all anymore. So I don't think you have a choice. How can you be an artist and not reflect the times? That to me is the definition of an artist.
Thank you and welcome to my channel, Simply Your World, where we discuss past and present events that will affect you if they haven't already. I have a question. How can you have something that means high moral standards and the word pedophilia in the same sentence? To me, that's outlandish, but there's this thing called virtuous pedophilia that is on the rise. This video is going to highlight a guy named Todd, who is a self-proclaimed non-offending pedophile, who is also a self-proclaimed monster but doesn't act on it. I added clips from a psychologist named Carl Jung, who is what you will call an analytical psychologist, who dives deep into the conscious and the unconscious mind, the persona, and the self behind the persona. I want you to pay special attention to these clips because it's going to give a more detailed description of Todd and what he was thinking and his traumas, his self-proclaimed traumas that developed this monster. Okay? As a disclaimer, this is no way a campaign for pedophilia. This is actually the opposite. I just want to show you that these are pedophiles on the reserve, and as the ceiling drops with these laws and these different legislations that makes it softer for pedophiles to exist, easier for pedophiles to exist, also as laws are made that makes pedophilia more acceptable to society, these people are going to come out of their shells and be what I call pedophiles on reserve. So with all that being said, let's get into it.
I'm not a monster. I have the traction, but I don't act on it.
Whoever looks into the mirror of the water will see first of all his own face. Whoever goes to himself risks a confrontation with himself. The mirror does not flatter, it faithfully shows whatever looks into it, namely, the face we never show to the world because we cover it with a persona, the mask of the actor, but the mirror lies behind the mask and shows the true face. The word persona originally refers to a theatrical mask worn by actors to depict the roles played by them. In Carl Jung's model of the psyche, the persona lies between our ego and society. The ego refers to our center of consciousness, which is responsible for our continuing sense of identity throughout our life, and the persona is the social mask that we put on. We all embody different masks in different settings, as it is our way to adapt to the demands of society, playing an important part in shaping our social role and in how we deal with other people. But it also has its dangers. The persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, fittingly enough a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual.
I am Todd Nickerson. I'm a non-offending pedophile. I have never, ever sexually abused a child. I never will. I do not look at child porn. I never will. I obey the laws. I respect the laws. I respect society's position on this. I understand it and agree with it. I am part of one of the most hated groups of society. No question about it. We are the scapegoats du jour. If you look at history, there's always one minority that seems to be the one that everybody kind of persecutes, and I think we're it. I'm campaigning for better treatment of people like me. We're non-offending pedophiles. Not all pedophiles are child molesters, and not all child molesters are pedophiles. Pedophile is, strictly speaking, is just somebody who has the sexual attraction to children. They may act on it, they may not. Pedophiles come from all walks of life. We come from all sorts of economic backgrounds, different occupations, and we look like everybody else. There are a lot of teachers and people that, who do work with kids, but I think most of us just hold regular jobs.
This is exactly what I mean by pedophiles on reserve. As the ceiling drops, as legislation is being made and passed, as we're going to get into in this video, and like I said, as the ceiling drops, these people are going to become more comfortable with letting out the monster that they say they're holding in, because they are conscious of society and the societal norms. But as these things become softer and more lax, you're going to have these people coming out of the woodworks, almost like the mammoth and stuck in a monster stuck in ice. You know what I mean? It's alive, but as the ice thaws around its feet, it's going to unleash its powers and its treachery on the world. You know what I mean? So that's just kind of some of the things I be thinking about when I'm making videos. But let's get back into it.
How would you say you managed to control your sexual urges?
A lot of people think that if you're attracted to kids that you have some kind of like unusual degree of urge to go out and attack kids, and it's not like that. Most people, when they see somebody that they're attracted to, do they automatically think, oh, I want to jump on them and have sex with them? So it's the same with us. It's just, we just happen to be attracted to kids.
Now imagine this guy being your teacher, or your son or daughter's teacher. Now he just said kids. He didn't say boy or girl. Okay, he just said kids. So your child can be in the environment of someone who puts on the persona of being the teacher, or being the nice coach, or being the nice neighbor. But really inside and inwardly, they are that monster that they speak of. But anyway, let's get back into it.
What age groups are you attracted to?
I would say it probably starts about 4 years old, and then goes up into early 20s, late teens, early 20s, and it kind of peaks at about like 9, 10 years old.
Outlines 2 stages of the persona. The first stage is that of identification. The performance of the persona is quite alright as long as one knows that one is not identical with the way one appears. It only becomes dangerous if one is unconscious of it or over-identifies with it. In this case, one must proceed to the second stage, that of disintegration, where one's persona is intentionally or unintentionally shattered, creating a state of chaos and disorientation. In very rare cases, one can have 2 or more personalities who have their own opinions and may contradict each other. This is known as dissociative identity disorder, a mental health condition which is usually a result of trauma. In the disintegration process, one can choose 3 different approaches. Negative restoration, where one pretends that he is as he was before the crucial experience in order to adapt to the status quo. Absence, where one lives without a persona and cannot possibly interact with the world. And restoration, where one develops a persona that one is conscious of and which does not hide one's true self.
And this is tied to a T. Like he said, he becomes conscious of his persona, of his intentions, and and he pretty much lets his true self out. That's exactly what he's doing. He's saying he's a pedophile but hasn't acted on it, but he's a monster on the inside. Please pay attention to these segments of this video and compare it to what you're hearing and what you're going to hear as Todd tells his story. I picked these clips because they are very, very appropriate when it comes to Todd and his story. So let's keep going.
If one is either unconscious or over-identifies with his persona, the optimal choice is restoration. Negative restoration hides one's true self, and absence of a persona may not only be impossible, but also undesirable, as one must adapt himself with the external world as much as his inner world.
How can you admit to wanting to legalize pedophilia? How can you say that you want friends that you don't care about their beliefs, but yet you don't want to be their friend because of their viewpoints? This ain't nothing but perversion and confusion all rolled into one.
When we do not want to reveal the truth about ourselves, we act as someone who we are not. There is always some element of pretense about the persona, for it is a kind of shop window in which we like to display our best wares. The persona begins to form early in childhood, out of a need to conform to the wishes and expectations of parents, peers, and teachers. Children quickly learn that certain attitudes and behaviors are acceptable and may be rewarded with approval, while others are unacceptable and may result in punishment. The tendency is to build acceptable traits into the persona and to keep unacceptable traits hidden or repressed. Perhaps being assertive is seen as rude and socially unacceptable, and one becomes passive, affecting one's relationships and career. Or one can be too agreeable because one doesn't like conflicts, but is taken advantage of. These undesirable aspects eventually take their toll on us as we mature, forming our shadow, the dark side of our personality, whom we may be possessed by at any moment.
Notice how Todd says as he got older, his urges got stronger, just like the video just implied. So let's keep going.
Certain emotional outbursts. For Jung, the negotiation with one's shadow is a lifelong process as part of our self-education, which allows us to rescue the good qualities that lie dormant in our psyche and be honest about who we are, as well as knowing how much good we can do and what crimes we are capable of. The shadow, which is usually perceived as negative, also has its positive side. It becomes hostile only when it is ignored or misunderstood. The other danger of the persona is an excessive identification with it. This indicates that our individuality is nothing but pure fiction. In rare cases, if the ego is completely identical with the persona, individuality is wholly repressed, representing maximum adaptation to society and minimum adaptation to one's individuality, inhibiting psychological development. Jung writes, "Every calling or profession has its own characteristic persona. A certain kind of behavior is forced on them by the world, and professional people endeavor to come up to these expectations. Only the danger is that they become identical with their personas, the professor with his textbook, the tenor with his voice. Then the damage is done. Henceforth, he lives exclusively against the background of his own biography. One could say, with a little exaggeration, that the persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is."
There was one event that basically hammered it home for me. I call it my eureka moment. It was the moment I realized I'm interested in these younger girls. I was 13, and a neighbor had come over to visit. He had brought his little daughter with him. She was probably about 7 or 8 years old. I was sitting in the living room drawing, and I just remember looking up and just being blown away by how beautiful I thought she was. Initially, I repressed the feelings, especially in my teen years. Because I was a regular at a church, I had asked God to take it away, and I kind of felt like He had. And as I started aging and realized that the age of the girls I was attracted to were staying the same, that's kind of when I realized, this was going to be a problem. I went out with a girl when I was 20 years old, so she was 26. She was very petite, so she was my type physically, or I thought, at the time. At this time, I still wasn't really that attracted to adults, but I thought, well, maybe I can make this work, We dated for about 3 weeks. I kept putting sex off. Finally, I gave in. We tried it. It just didn't work. I went on a couple of dates after that with a couple of girls, but, it never really got past that first date stage, and my heart wasn't in it. For all intents and purposes, I am a virgin. I've never had full-blown sexual intercourse. It just hasn't happened.
You had suffered abuse as a child. Can you tell us about that?
I came over to visit my grandmother. There was a guy that they didn't really know him that well. He was an acquaintance. And she asked me if I would take him outside to show my grandpa's garden. He went out to the side of the garden and sat down on the ground and patted the ground. indicating he wanted me to sit by him. And so I did, and then he just basically touched me. So it was a one-time event. I wouldn't say that it was the only thing that led to my sexuality. I would say there was probably a lot of other things that led me in that direction. But yeah, I think it was probably a contributing factor. You know, I am a pretty reclusive person by nature, so I don't interact with the public that much anyway. You know, I don't go out of my way to be around children. If they're around me, then they're around me. It happens. You can't completely cut yourself off.
Our state's sex offender registry violates the Constitution's cruel and unusual punishment clause for 3 plaintiffs. That's the ruling from a senior U.S. District Court judge. Denver 7's Lance Hernandez is in the newsroom with more on this. Okay, Lance, so what does this mean for other plaintiffs and for others on the sex offender registry?
Well, Judge Mach said long-term listing on the registry and the required sharing of email addresses with law enforcement when no other offenses have been committed amounts to continued punishment, but he didn't issue an injunction. So the 3 plaintiffs may have to return to state court to ask for removal from the registry.
I added this segment to the video to show you exactly what I mean by as laws become passed and legislation is passed, it makes it easier for pedophiles to exist. Also, you're going to see in real-time description of lawyers and judges explaining why it's inhumane for pedophiles to be punished. So let's get back into it.
I think it's a fabulous decision.
Former prosecutor Karen Steinhauser says many DAs had qualms about the sex offender registry from day one.
The concern that we had about this particular law is that it was taking the discretion away from the prosecutors in terms of really being able to look at individual cases.
The Sex Offender Registration Act requires convicted sex offenders to register with the state. Their names, addresses, and physical descriptions are all posted online. In 2005, Denver 7 Investigates exposed leasing agents who were erroneously telling prospective tenants there were no sex offenders living on their property. We found one apartment complex had 18. One of them was plaintiff David Millert. He had already served his time and completed treatment. After our report, an eviction notice was posted on his door giving him 30 days to move. He filled out 200 or more rental applications without success. He eventually bought a house, but remains subject to periodic visits by police. And when he's not home, they leave brightly colored registered sex offender tags on his door, instructing him to call.
What this judge did is did a kind of a 2-part analysis, is say, first of all, this is punishment. That being a registered sex offender, even if the intent wasn't to punish.
Judge Mach wrote, the evidence in this case demonstrates that the very real restraints on plaintiffs' abilities to live, work, accompany their children to school, and otherwise freely live their lives are not simply a result of the crimes they committed, but of their placement on the registry and publication of their status.
Steinhauser says when you hear the word sex offender, you think of a creepy guy in the park targeting kids. She says there are actually different degrees of sexual offense and that a one-size approach, like the registry, isn't the best way to deal with them. She expects the legislature may get involved in reworking the law.
Check out how California is doing its part to make it easier for your children to be preyed upon.
The 120 residents here are convicted rapists, child sex abusers, and addicts of child pornography. So, every one of the people here are the neighbours that no one else really wants to have.
Absolutely. The not in my backyard people.
The village of the damned.
I refer to us as the societal lepers of the 21st century.
Showing me around this godforsaken underworld is Bill Fury, a convicted child molester. He's lived here for a decade and is surprisingly open about what makes someone like him commit the most deplorable acts against children.
I added this clip to show what I feel is the reason why they're softening these laws. Because this clip is from Australia. They have these things called pervert parks all over America, all over the world. I can show you some in the UK, just anywhere you can imagine. They have these organizations, these communities set up for people who have been ostracized from society. I believe that these communities are becoming so big. It's almost like an outdoor prison, or and it has lawyers, doctors, teachers, grocery store clerks, librarians, regular people who are being ostracized to these communities or being condemned to these communities. So with the communities becoming so big, they almost have to allow these people out in society and deal with them in a different way, because the community is becoming so big. Also, a question was asked here soon as the video plays: how do you stop pedophilia? I truly believe you can't stop pedophilia due to the fact that it is a mental illness, and everyone who understands psychology knows that mental illness cannot be cured. It can only be maintained. So with mental illness not being able to be cured, and pedophilia is a mental illness, then you would have to assert that pedophilia ain't gonna stop no time soon. So let's keep going.
I did what I did. I know why I did it. I know how I did it. I know how I went about it. It was a setup, a predatorial action. I was a predator. I did that.
But as sickening as this place is, it could hold the key to answering one of the biggest questions of our time. How do we stop pedophiles from offending in the first place?